The digestive system, it is its own nervous system. Really, it is. Some textbooks are starting to include the gut brain or the digestive system's nervous system as a branch of the nervous system. The gut brain, it's not really a branch of the nervous system, though. The enteric nervous system or the gut brain, it is its own brain. There's a lot of sensory info that is not sent to your brain in your head, but that sensory info is interpreted and sent to other cells located in the area. So, for example, chemoreceptors in the stomach connect to muscularis externa smooth muscle fibers in the stomach. And this is what's called a short reflex. The brain is not involved. There are pacemaker cells in various parts of your digestive tract, right? And those pacemaker cells don't play with the brain, they do their own thing. So, much like the pacemaker cells in the heart, these cells have spontaneous depolarizations, but they can agree to pay attention to signals coming from the brain if they want or need to. When the brain is involved, we usually call it a long reflex. Between the two layers of smooth muscle found in the muscularis externa is the myenteric nerve plexus, and that's a network of nerves controlling mostly motility. This nerve plexus contains autonomic motor neurons, as the contractions are not consciously controllable. Another nerve plexus is called the submucosal nerve plexus, which is located in, oh, I can't remember, the submucosal layer. That one contains both sensory and motor neurons, so it sends information to the brain, but it also sends information to other cells that are local to the area. And it likes to control the glands of the submucosa and mucosa. Together, these two plexuses, they regulate the two things that the digestive system does: muscle contractions and glandular secretions. The myenteric plexus is also known as Auerbach's plexus, and it's sandwiched between the two layers of the muscularis externa. Its location is like prime. It allows it to innervate the two layers of smooth muscle of the muscularis externa. It is a prime location for controlling peristalsis and segmentation. The myenteric plexus is never inactive. It is constantly sending action potentials to maintain a low level of contraction. This way, the muscle is always like ready whenever it's needed, right? You don't have to wake it up. You just have to get it out the door. The myenteric plexus does not operate in isolation. It interacts with extrinsic inputs from the autonomic nervous system. Parasympathetic fibers, such as those from the vagus nerve, generally promote motility and digestion, while sympathetic fibers inhibit motility and serve as a protective mechanism to stop your digestive system under stress or danger. Gastroparesis is characterized by delayed gastric emptying and is often caused by damage to the myenteric plexus or stress, both things that impair gastric motility. This condition, gastroparesis, is commonly seen in diabetes as nerve damage sets in the later stages. With that, it can lead to nausea, bloating, early satiety, being full earlier. Another syndrome of the myenteric plexus is IBS. It's a dysfunction in the coordination of motility. So it leads to things like abdominal cramping, altered bowel movements, and bloating as your motility starts to see this like stop and start kind of motion with IBS, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be a smooth flow of things. The submucosal plexus is also known as Meissner's plexus, and it controls the secretion of digestive enzymes and other fluids from the various glands that are peppered throughout the digestive tract. So, like the esophageal glands that secreted bicarbonate, any of those stomach glands that secreted all of those fluids, small intestine glands, anything embedded in the submucosa and spilling things out into the lumen is controlled by this submucosal plexus. It responds to local stimuli, like the presence of food or the presence of the breakdown products of food. But it also responds to neural inputs from the brain to adjust those levels of secretion. It also helps regulate local blood flow through the gastrointestinal submucosa. It influences the vasoconstriction and vasodilation of arterioles in those mesenteries. So while the myenteric plexus controlled things like straight up motor functions, peristalsis, the submucosal plexus, it controls more glandular secretions, but it can control some really localized movements like the contractions of villi. It also helps coordinate like very fine motility patterns that might enhance the absorption of specific nutrients at the mucosal surface. There are sensory inputs to the brain and motor outputs, right? Like any system in your body controlling any type of muscle or gland. But it's a little bit more complicated with the GI tract. It's not just about like one input, one output. There are baroreceptors that sense the stretching of the GI tract as food enters into different segments. There are chemoreceptors all throughout your GI tract that sense pH changes because as food is digestive, the bolus, the slurry, the chyme generally becomes more acidic. There are chemoreceptors in your digestive tract that look for the end products of digestion. They look for things like amino acids, kind of asking, have we broken down all of the proteins? There are chemoreceptors that look for fatty acids, kind of asking, have we broken down all of our fats? And there are chemoreceptors that sense osmolarity, right? And they pretty much ask, have we released tons of ions into our little slurry or chyme? And does it have a good solubility? I'm sorry, does it have a certain tonicity? All of these things are just a few things that many sensory inputs are involved in the digestive control. Outputs only control two things: smooth muscle by way of the myenteric plexus, or glands by way of the submucosal plexus. When parasympathetic fibers from the vagus nerve secrete acetylcholine, we activate the digestive system in our rest and digest phase. When parasympathetic fibers from the myenteric plexus secrete acetylcholine, the smooth muscle fibers of the muscularis externa contract in peristalsis or segmentation. There are some reflexes that the central gastric system forces upon you that you are kind of unable to control. The three that I have here, I believe, are long reflexes. I believe. Damn it, I'm going to have to look that up. So it also involves the gastroenteric reflex, and this reflex stimulates stomach motility and small intestine secretion. The gastroenteric reflex can be stimulated by you smelling food that smells very appetizing. And what happens is the gastroenteric reflex increases secretions, starts gastrin secreting, and it gets your GI tract ready for incoming food. Another reflex, vomiting, which is, I guess, pretty much the opposite of the gastroenteric reflex. Vomiting occurs when the brain detects irritation, chemicals, toxicity, and what it does is it relaxes the sphincters, allowing your food to flow backward and hopefully out. The gastroileal reflex is often humorously called the reflex that is making room for more. What the gastroileal reflex does is it tries to push food with a big motility contraction. It tries to push food from the small intestine to the large intestine. And this sometimes can stimulate very powerful bowel movements. The gastroileal reflex is stimulated by you physically putting food into your stomach. Baroreceptors that receive the information that your stomach has expanded feed back to motility or smooth muscle that is in the ileum and the large intestine. And therefore, as your stomach fills with food, your large intestine is also getting ready to push out whatever food you had before that.